Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fireside Chats with Mr. Grumpy. We are on a bit of a break with Salty Goodness as we're trying to figure out some issues. We're also getting ready to plan for something called Mega Show, which is going to be ridiculous if it all works out correctly. So I also want to give a shout out to Entering the Black Hole with Rick and Anthony. Those guys have hosted me twice now for a Meet the Chatters, and also a numbered show, which those guys did. And I was recently on another show with Eric Feeling over on the offensive line, which is a hell of a blast, and we had a great time doing that. I'm going to get both those guys into Mega Show, hopefully, and maybe another podcast or two. We're thinking about getting a giant round table and recording a whole bunch of shit talking all at the same time. I also have something else that I really want to announce, but we don't have confirmation on that just yet. So moving forward, I definitely am starting doing this show a lot more, a couple times a week possibly. Got a lot more free time than I used to have as work has decided to cut my hours down to less than 20 per week, so it gives me a lot more time to invest in hanging out with you guys and shooting the shit. Salty Goodness will be coming back in a little less than a month, hopefully. If not, then we're going to be figuring some stuff out and just moving forward in the next couple of weeks. We're trying to obtain some new gear, which is taking a little bit longer than we expected because, that shit costs money. And when you're not working and not doing as much stuff, you just got to kind of move with the flow. So let's get right into it. The show originally, when it started, was just me expressing interest in telling life stories and things like that. But I think we can shift it into pretty much whatever I want, because there is no real reason I should limitate myself. That's a joke. If you understand it, that's cool, but limit myself to just doing the group show. I'm also trying to connect with other podcasters on many different levels across the United States now. I now have the resources to do a remote podcast, and there's a lot of things that could be coming up, which will be super, super cool. So with that, welcome to another episode of Fireside with Mr. Grumpy. That name is, I don't know if we're going to keep that name or not, because that's a really long name, and everybody's got a show called Fireside Chats. So I changed the intro music to a old Chicago band I used to listen to called the Blue Meanies. I thought it was a great way to just jump into a more exciting, more thrilling show than the jazz intro that I originally had. I've actually recorded a few of these shows, but I didn't like how they turned out. It just, was a senseless babbling that never took place to anywhere specific. And I really don't want to get political on this show because it's, like I said, it's me talking just randomly into a microphone about whatever issue is the most important as of right now. But I would like to discuss things that are currently going on in the United States, which is really troubling to me. And so, have you guys ever felt like right now in the States, we're just kind of stuck in this perpetual state of the 99% versus the 1%, and how we're all broke and how the rich people are making more money? Well, it just seems a little bit off kilter to me to even just see some people who are driving around in like Teslas and stuff like that who own businesses, which I completely agree with owning a mom and pop shop and just being successful in what you're doing. I've recently worked for several restaurants that have gone under in the last year. I worked for two fairly popular restaurants that both have closed in a matter of less than a year on one, and the other one was around for about 3 years, and they were extremely popular. And the lobby was always full. The dining room was always full, and yet here we are, and both of them are closed, and now I work for a major retail, which has, cut my hours down to an extreme minimum, which I don't really understand. If you're a successful business, why you're limiting the hours to less than 30, especially if you're someone who is trained at every portion of the store. But we'll see what happens with that. That's not really a podcast issue or anything. But I am happy that I have more free time to now develop and hone my skills a little bit better to do this with you guys. It's still kind of nerve-wracking to do a podcast by myself because there is no interaction with others to like jump in and contradict my thoughts and, carry on. It's very, very lonely, I suppose, but if once I can get through it and grow to do this as an enjoyable experience and not really a nerve-wracking. See, even my hands are shaking right now. I can get on somebody else's podcast and just shoot the shit for days, but actually trying to do this by yourself is a whole lot more difficult. Yes, I have the freedom of expression without anybody contradicting me, but also it's kind of lonely. And I really am a person who can build off others and jump right in there and kind of mesh with any host or hostess. I like being a guest co-host on a lot of different podcasts. But anyways, going back to the subject, I think that in the United States right now, we really need to take a look at what corporate greed is doing to the states. We have everything. I want to start with like Martin Shkreli, who is now in jail, thank God, for whatever awful fucking thing he did. I think it was some insider trading or, but any guy that takes a diabetes pen and boost it up to 600% above its market price that originally used to be $10 should be, shoved into a nice little riverbank with a bag over his face. But that's just me. So, going back to the definition of what corporate greed is, we're going to go to the exact definition. Corporate greed is when a business grows to the point that it can control the market and or regulators to squeeze out competitors through the means of providing superior value to customers. An example was John D. Rockefeller used capitalism to find Standard Oil. You can also go back to even Getty, and he was the one who was able to take the full market of Saudi Arabian oil and became the richest man in the world, which was recently a major blockbuster movie with Mark Wahlberg and a few other cast members who are notable. And, moving forward with this, you see it now more with the Trump administration. And, I don't want to be one of those people who talks about the president badly, but, if you'll see my reactions on Salty Goodness's Twitter page, you'll see that I'm not really much of a Trump supporter, but that's not much to discredit him at this point just based on his policies. I think he's an awful human being that has moral deprivation in his soul. And right now, the scandals of Stormy Daniels and the many other women who have accused him of sexual relations. And anyways, Donald Trump in himself is a businessman, a poor businessman, but a businessman nonetheless. So he's taking on Amazon right now with their corporate greed, which is closing many, many retailers. Like recently, Toys R Us is closing, and in the past, Amazon has been, and Walmart used to push out a lot of local businesses, like all the mom and pop stores, like the local hardware stores, and even way back when they closed Borders, and the only standalone bookstore right now is Barnes & Noble's, which is my current employer, which, I truly enjoy working for them when I can work for them, but there's not that many hours when you're dealing with losing business all the time. They're the only retailers that I know of right now aside from like Best Buy, and even then they've cut their selections. They cut their music departments. They've cut their CD department down to almost nothing. They're basically a TV, computer, and some software retailers. But I mean, if whatever happened to being able to go to a store and look at what you want to purchase versus, going on Amazon and, hoping that you would get the best product that you could possibly get. So I guess with the death of retail, it's getting harder and harder. Even the introduction of Uber Eats and Amazon Eats put another job that I had out of business But I can't really talk about that due to a pending lawsuit against that said company because of the way they treated their workers. So is capitalism versus corporate greed, is it the death of capitalism? That's really where this is all going, because if you look at capitalism, the idea behind capitalism is that everyone is able to live on a 40-hour a week salary, or, if it's possible, from a single income or two incomes. At least that's the way it was in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then the 70s came around with the great oil crisis and many other things that made the economy change. And congressmen and women then became entangled with lobbyist groups, which, has changed the way our political spectrum has gone into the way it is now. And without further ado, let's talk about how ridiculous corporate greed has gotten. The first one I want to talk about is McDonald's. McDonald's realized that they could save a buck if they use less cheese. I know it sounds ridiculous, but believe it or not, McDonald's staple menu item was the cheeseburger. And then came the McDouble. The McDouble was a cash cow, and all they did was reduce the amount of cheese, and it saved them millions. So when you go to McDonald's now, you get a McDouble. Yeah, it's cheap, but you're not getting the double cheeseburger. You're getting a single cheeseburger with two meat patties. This is just the dumbest thing I've ever fucking heard of. And it's just unbelievable what these companies do to just save money. And, the next one is even dumber. I'm not going to say the official company was airlines went down to using a single toilet on an airplane. It saved them $40,000. So you got 127 to 190 passengers on an airplane with one goddamn bathroom. What a fucking shit job that was. But it saves... Even if you flew first class, you still had to use the coach bathroom. That's unbelievable. Yeah. And another one is Orbitz charges Apple users more because they can. If you're an Orbitz user and you're using a Mac, they're charging you more money. How the fuck does that work out? I guess Microsoft for life, right? And, my God. After 9/11, the most tragic event in U.S. history of the modern world, modern times, I suppose, McDonald's bought every American flag just so they could do a resale of it and mark up the prices on them. So that means, yes, there was a giant boost for American flag makers, but the only place you could buy an American flag, now, keep in mind you could still buy one from the internet, I'm supposing, from Amazon. I don't know if they were that popular back then, but, I mean, they just completely marketed the American flag revolution. What the fuck? That's so unpatriotic. I can't even believe it. And if we're going into another example of corporate greed,